After much dependence on and concentration on oil, Nigeria's agricultural fortunes are dwindled. There seems to be commitment on the part of government to ensure regulation and control systems for Nigeria exportable products, particularly agro-commodities, to the international market with renewed strategies to eliminate or reduce trade barriers to Nigerian exports. In fact, Nigeria used to be a formidable agricultural exporter up to the mid-1960s. Consequently, the World Trade Organization has launched the Standards Trade Development Facility project for Nigeria towards enforcing sanitary and phytosanitary requirements to shape the future of Nigerian trade. Nigeria today will be throwing conversations around the implementation of Standards Trade Development Facility project in Nigeria. Thanks for joining us. Welcome aboard. I'm Ikaria Clinton. To shed more light on the Standards Trade Development Facility project and its implementation in Nigeria is an economist and international trade expert in trade policy and trade law, Simeon Umokoro. You're welcome to Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
And also with us is Annabelle Kamuche. She's the CEO and Managing Director, NICERT. Thank you for joining us on Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Now, today, I'll break the rules. I will not go with the lady first. Hope you don't mind.
Okay.
So I'll go with the man. So, Simeon, tell us, break it down. You know, I saw a lot of sanitary, phytosanitary, and all of that. Break it down. What does this standard trade facility project of standard trade development facility project? What is it all about? Break it down for the layman, and what is its primary objective?
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to use the pineapple analogy to just simplify the conversation. We all take time to go into markets to buy things, right? On occasions you choose to buy a pineapple, and we instinctively ask for test so that we're sure the claim by the seller is as true in the tasting of the pineapple before we take them with us and pay for it. It is upon that condition being met that we exchange payment, right? We also ensure that we know where we pick them up from in case we do have to return them. Peradventure, wrong or spoiled parts have been packed in our bags. Now, with that simple analogy of how we do exchange of market and trade, imagine if you have to do that to a truckload of pineapple. Would you be testing all? No. You will have to apply the same approach, however, in a different way. And this is what the WTO's SPS agreement speaks to. Coming up with internationally accepted rules on how, first, the claims, the requirements of the buyer is met, and how you can test and indeed certify as such, and also have traceability requirements in the rules on how best globally we should all trade together as nations. This is what the SPS agreement speaks to. Basically about one, the plant health or animal health, which is where you have the sanitary and the phytosanitary conversation. So in layman language, the WTO SPS agreement speaks to what the health requirements are for plants and animal in case you choose to trade globally. The requirements that must be met is contained in the rules in the agreement called the SPS agreement.
Okay, now, Annabelle, tell us how, what do we stand to benefit as a country from this, from this project?
Okay, so as a country, based on this project, I think that one of the greatest things as a nation that we stand to benefit is the ability to increase our exports and get multiple markets that we can access, because most of the markets that we are not able to access today, which people might sometimes term as trade barriers are actually not our product not being able to comply with the basic international standards for our product to be able to get into that market. So in terms of export volumes, it would increase. In terms of access to market, it will be more. And then it will also now generally help with the economy, because we are now moving from a mono economy to an economy that is largely dependent on non-oil exports.
Okay, now back to you, Simeon. You've talked so much about she's talked about the benefit. You've told us the objective. Now give us, are there countries in the world where these has been, where we have these kinds of, projects and it's been working, and tell us about it.
Okay, the STDF is not new. It's the WTO's approach to helping developing countries meet with the requirements in terms of developing capability to meet with the requirements of the SPS agreement. Nigeria is not the first. There are countries in Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, even Ghana at some point had enjoyed some of the SCDF interventions. On this particular occasion where Nigeria is penciled to enjoy this, this particular intervention is to the tune of $1.2 million, with a counterpart funding coming from the WTO STDF unit to the tune of $999,000. It's meant to be implemented over 2 years period into the third year, depending on whatever the challenges are. And the implementing partner is the ITC, which is where you have the ITC coming in the acronym that's peddled all around within the news. What exactly does this STDF do to countries? The SPS agreement are technical content in itself. Hence, some developing countries find it challenging to meet with the requirements, either in the definition of the standards or the traceability requirements. The WTO came up with the STDF intervention to help develop the capability within countries on how best first to identify standards that are required, how to meet those standards with your conformity assessment schemes, and ensure traceability. Now, for the Nigerian STDF, which is the STDF PG 845, part of what they're looking to do is train about 30 trainers who will then train about 300 more and provide that capacity in terms of content on how best to carry out good agricultural practice, good hygiene practice, HACCP, which is the short form for hazard and critical control points in your production process. The idea is to ensure that farmers, processors, storage providers, and indeed the entire scheme of players in the value chain get to understand what their role is, because quality as a conversation is an end-to-end process. You don't start quality at the export gate. Neither does it stop at the farm gate. It starts from the soil, from the handlers, from the processors, the equipment you use, the expertise you bring to bear. And in all this process, the requirement is a third party must come to certify your claim of what you are meeting in the requirements as provided by the SPS agreement. And this is where certification comes to play. And if you recall, when the DG was talking about, the WTO DG was talking about some of the challenges yesterday in her speech, she specifically mentioned certification requirements as the basic challenge that Nigeria is faced with. Certification requires a third party to come, assess, certify your claims. Until we have that done in the globally best practice or acceptable way, we would keep struggling. And I think that's where this intervention is quite timely, as Nigeria is looking to diverse completely from oil, as it were.
Now, Annabelle, are there specific products we are looking at here, or just about any products, maybe from agricultural products? Are there specific agricultural products you're looking at here?
Okay, so from her speech yesterday, Dr. Ngozi's speech yesterday, she had mentioned sesame and cowpea as products that they would be focusing on. But I'm sure they would also look at other products that Nigeria has comparative advantage, so that, you know, it's a holistic thing. But I also think that it will also be important to note at this point that we would, as a nation, apart from cowpea and sesame, identify products that would have challenges. So products, for instance, that we've been having a lot of rejects. We can focus on those products and pilot them, and then we can use that as a proof of concept to now move into other value chains that don't have as much issues as we have with, say, cowpea or sesame that we've had multiple alerts from both the EU and Japan.
Okay, having talked about cowpea and the sesame, so what are the requirements, the SPC requirement for Nigeria to export this product you just mentioned?
So the SPS requirement is the same for almost all value chains in terms of agricultural products, from, you know, ensuring that there are no pests, because one of the things that one needs to look out for is to ensure that there is no transportation of pests from one country to the other. So there will be physical inspection of the product to just ascertain the claim. So if, for instance, you are saying it is white sesame, it's actually white sesame, for instance. If you are saying that the cleanliness or impurity is 99%, when random check is done and samples are collected, based on the analysis, they should also be able to ascertain that the purity level is 99.9%. And all of that. Then the issue of the laboratory testing to also ensure that the pesticide residue level is within the allowable limit for the importing country, and that there is no transfer of pests. So you can find sometimes in products you see dead pests or even seaweed. Weed seed that moves from one, that you want to now move from one country to another, that can cause very serious issues in the importing country. So these are part of the things that the SPS looks at, both for cowpea, for sesame, and all agricultural products.
So how do we deal with the issue of traceability? You just talked about how all these line of action that we'll be taking. So how do we deal with traceability?
So traceability is a very serious issue that Nigeria even has to begin to look at. Because I will give you an instance. In the EU right now, the EU has set up what is called the EU, it's called EU Deforestation Regulation Act, that speaks to traceability for some value chains. So they just started, it's going to take effect December 2024, and they've lined up some value chains that must have this traceability system for this product to be able to come into the EU, of which sesame seed and cocoa, rubber, soya is part of them. So Nigeria has to now begin to look at how do we rework our system. What most exporters will do is they aggregate from local market. Most exporters don't have traceability system. Nobody is able to trace where 1 ton of sesame is coming from. Everybody goes to the owner market, for instance, in Kano, and aggregates sesame, take to their warehouse, clean them, and export. If there is an issue, you won't be able to trace. You can only trace to the point of the person you bought it at the owner market. What happened at the primary level, nobody knows. So we now have to consciously begin to say, look, you know what? We have to cluster the farmers. We have to give some sort of unique identification number. We have to now begin to trace from the kind of inputs that were used to the farmer, the size of hectarage, all the way to the logistics of it, to the local aggregation centers, to the local buying agents, to the aggregators and exporters, all the way to when this cargo is put in a container for export.
Wow.
All that documentation must be put in place. And the reason that is very important is, if there is a reject today and we are saying, for instance, no, everything was done properly, you can now, during investigation, they would ask you for those kind of documentations so that they are able to trace from the point of export all the way to the primary level. But if we don't have those kind of documentation, it will only be my assertion. You can say, oh, I did A, B, C, D, but there is no documentation to prove that you actually did what you claim that you did. And for instance, if there is even any problem at all, so rather than saying, oh, you know what, we will not buy products, sesame, for instance, from Nigeria anymore, we can isolate where that issue is coming from. Maybe it's sesame from Kebbi or sesame from Castina, and say, you know what, there will be a special intervention for farmers in Castina State, maybe in the northern part, to say, you know what, now the issue of pesticide residue is here now. There's a lot of pesticide residue. We have to now train you, as again saying, okay, we have to train 1 million Nigerian farmers that are planting sesame.
Annabelle, I have to stop you here because I know you have a lot of things to say. I'll come back to you, Simeon. But let's take a break and listen to the views of the Director General, World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Doris Anite, and of course, the Executive Director, Nigerian Export Promotion Council, Nonye Ayeni. Don't go away.
What we're trying to do is build the capacity and change the habits using pesticide levels to comply with international standards, making sure quality is observed. It will take a couple of years, 2 years, to get people to that standard. But it's worth it because your income can double or triple. So we're having the program. That one will have direct impact. All the other ones we talked about, they're all designed to impact people.
They're going to be helping us to invest in the digital infrastructure, the hardware and the software to make it happen. And that's a major boost for all manufacturers and all producers in the country. So it will help us, even with integrated payment systems, to even export.
And also increase the quantity of production, enhance food security, and create jobs.
Welcome back. This is still Nigeria Today, and we're looking at the implementation of Standard Trade Development Facility Project. And I'm here, I have a gentleman and a lady. And Simeon, of course, Annabelle said quite a lot of things. And I was wondering, how can the small scale, and medium size industries or enterprises be trained, be supported to achieve this, the implementation of this project, to achieve the best international standards?
Great. Let me take it from the last question you asked earlier, where you talked about specific issues with cowpea and how to ensure it's removed. Based on the content of the legal text that resulted to the rejections of cowpea, conversation was basically focused on the content, the residual level of the pesticide that was used, diclovos in this particular case. From research, it's clear that the major part of the value chain where most of the problem lies is usually around storage. For us to help the small-scale farmer, or indeed the processors that are in that space, to leverage whatever it is the benefit is coming from the STDF, is one, that Nigeria should have a policy framework that speaks to traceability. And you can capture that in an integrated export control plan for the country, which we don't have as we speak. The country should have a policy instrument that speaks to what level of traceability do we want to adhere to for all our exports. You could do 2 steps backward, 5 steps backward, depending on how you choose as a country. But there should be a common language in our policy instrument that speaks to that. First off, when we have that common language and common narrative on how we intend to go on traceability, we can then begin to mainstream this process in how we document. The STDF will come and provide the knowledge, but the knowledge cannot be copied and pasted. You can't do a copy and paste of that particular thing. You have to adapt your particular structure, either regulatory or institutional, to what the best practice should be. But we need to speak to the policy instrument that decides on how we as a country want to ensure traceability is enshrined or mainstreamed in our agricultural produce and processes. For SMEs, I think Annabelle spoke to one point that is always the best practice globally: cluster. SMEs must learn to collaborate, coordinate in a cluster. That's been a challenge over the years, getting SMEs to sit down, agree on how to collaborate together, because the SMEs we have are usually very weak, respectfully, as individual SMEs. But they can do better when they come together and cluster. It's in the cluster you will have them work with the requirements and comply, and use that same collaborative work to do what? Achieve what it is, the cost, because there's a cost element in conforming to international best practice in terms of standards. There are cost elements that has to do with complying with destination regulation requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Annabelle, back to you. You've talked so much about how these things are done. Now, this project, how do we ensure, one, transparency in the implementation, monitoring, and of course, evaluation?
Okay, so for transparency, it's a big question, but I'm hoping that the agencies of government that are going to be working with ITC, in this case NEPC, would be as transparent as possible in the workings, in how they implement this project. That's very key. And then what was the monitoring? So for me, I think at the beginning, it's good that we are having this conversation now, for us to now decide what our success indices will be. That if after 1 year, we are able, that after 1 year, we must ensure that we're able to see A, B, C, D, E. Otherwise, that means this project has failed. If we don't put that in place, it will be like other projects that have come to Nigeria and haven't created any impact at all. So we have to create those indices to just ensure that we get it right. And then for evaluation, we have to now know the people who have benefited from this. How have they been able to, after 2-3 years, where were they at the time when they got this information, they got the training, they got the intervention? Where are they now, 3 years after, to just ensure that they have substantially moved from where they are to where we want them to be, or where the program actually intends for them to be in terms of impact. That's the only way we will be able to say that this has been successfully done.
Okay, and one last question now for you, Simeon. Just tell us in 30 seconds, where should, in your opinion, where should our investment, be channeled to,
As a country.
as a country?
So, investment should be channeled to the aftermath of this intervention. When the capacity building is done, as a country, we now need to take it off from there and see how we can leverage for sustaining the benefits. And the steps to doing this goes beyond mere capacity building. We now need to strengthen institutions, reposition institutions to be able to support systems, and introduce the private sector investment funds into quality conversations in the Nigerian market.
Good.
There's a need for a third-party investment fund to come in to do what? Provide certification services. Because the market is so huge, even the destination markets are so wide, you need additional hands to provide certification. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. With that, to wrap up today's episode of Nigeria Today. A very big thank you to Simeon Umokoro. He's an economist and international trade expert in trade policy and trade law. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Annabelle Kamuche, the CEO and Managing Director, NICERT. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for
very
your time.
much.
And thank you for being part of the program. Don't forget, Nigeria Today airs weekday at 7:30 p.m. on NTA News 24. You can also check out this episode and others on www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. Once again, thank you for watching. I am Eukaria Clinton saying goodbye.